7th. 2021 meeting. And does anyone have any changes or additions that they'd like to see? I'll pass the mic.
I found some typos.
Yeah, there were a few typos.
I got a couple of periods.
They're
and
obvious,
an
though.
if instead of an is.
Yeah.
And something else.
And we let it pass on the typos and we accept the minutes as typo.
I'll second.
Kyle, motion to accept as amended, and Bernstein second. All in favor?
Aye. No objections.
We also, just not on the agenda, but I'm going to add review of the CIP meeting minutes. Added. This was October 21st, 2021.
And it was an oversight on my part, not noticing that we didn't approve them until tonight.
Yeah.
I noticed it after last meeting. What we did, all we did was a text, so it didn't dawn on us. It's the highlights. But then, at the following meeting, when we approved the capital improvement plan, the chair has sent a memo with all our changes as attached spreadsheets. So this is the minutes from the meeting. But then actually, we took it.
Are we ready to approve the minutes?
I will approve minutes as amended.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I was not present, abstained.
Abstain. Great, all right, thank you. We're gonna open the public hearing. There are 2 items on the agenda. The proposed changes by the planning board and then the changes. Sitting for this public hearing, we need a roll call again.
Sarah Kyle present.
Bernstein present, Linda Coonhart.
Fitzgerald present.
Hardwick present. Dixon present.
Thank you. What I would like to do for this public hearing, we have quite a few people on Zoom and Jamie is monitoring that. I'd like to open the meeting with comments from the public. So, yeah,
Enter into the record that it was when it was published.
okay, sorry, yeah. I need to also state the advertisement date of the hearing.
The advertisement, yes. December 20th or 21st? 21st, whatever that.
It was advertised on December 21st, 2021.
Yep.
In the ledger. And it was posted on the website. Okay, thank you. So this first part of the agenda, sorry, I'd like to open the public comment. And this is pertaining to the amendments that are proposed by the planning board. And I'd like to welcome all public comments. You need to come to the microphone so everyone can hear. We're also picking it all up on Zoom, so people on Zoom can hear as well. So if you have a comment about the first item on the agenda, which is proposed changes by the planning board, please raise your hand and come on up to the microphone, state your name and address the board. Is there anyone here who would like to?
Can you split it up so that we're doing different segments of it? Because I feel we're here for different comments of it, and not all of us have heard and seen all the terminology that is used. So I think you break down the individual subject.
You want to do it in order,
Yeah, you're right in order where you have
Of Gary's,
take each section separately.
so start with 3.1, 2.17 short-term rentals.
Okay, the first item is 3.17, short-term rentals. This pertains to Airbnb and vacation rentals. Does anyone have a comment? Yes? You have a, did you raise your hand? Are there any comments on Zoom? No.
Oh. You want to put comments?
Yes.
Can you explain on that what you're trying to create? What is the purpose of that?
Want me to talk about it?
Okay.
Is that working?
So,
Now? Okay, basically, this was begun, this discussion was begun because of a comment made by the town officers that they were getting a lot of requests for Airbnbs and discussion about Airbnbs. And the planning board, the town, sorry, the state and the state courts have determined that Airbnbs are not a residential use, they are a business use. So in Francistown, really businesses have to either be permitted, well, in Francistown, anything has to be, other than residential farming and a few other things, has to be permitted, or it's not permitted. The building code enforcement officer, building inspector, who is our code enforcement officer, looked at the ordinance and couldn't find any way that a B&B could be permitted under our current zoning without them having to get a special exception and site plan review under the bed and breakfast provision of our zoning. He felt that was over the top. So the planning board subcommittee that was working on the ordinance changes looked at it, and we agreed that it was a lot to ask, but maybe a simpler process, a one board approval was enough. We didn't feel that we could recommend that it just be a permitted use because there were some safety issues and parking issues and that kind of stuff. So we looked into the state law and how we could provide for it without it being too onerous for residents to get permission to have an Airbnb. And we found conditional use permits where you can just go to the planning board, prove specific criteria as outlined in the ordinance, and get permission to do it without having to go to two different boards. So this change is it's in the next change is establishing Article 3B conditional use permits, because Francistown doesn't have that now. A lot of towns around us do, Boston, New Boston, Hancock, a whole bunch of towns do use conditional permits. We just never have. We've always had either permitted with conditions or by special exception and site plan review. This is kind of a middle ground. And so both of these changes have to go into effect to have it work perfectly. If this passes without the conditional use thing passed, we will have it on the books, but no way to implement it. So the conditional use is basically saying, yeah, planning board, you're authorized to basically do a site plan review with a couple of conditions and make sure everything's copacetic before you go forward with an Airbnb. Does that make sense with that explanation?
Yeah, that's what I understand.
Okay.
This is like a minimum requirement.
Yeah, it's without having this be straight permitted.
You gotta use the.
If you want to speak, please come to and state your name. Sure.
Henry Cameron, 13 Oakville. So I just want everybody to understand some of the steps and everything that you're doing, because some of these other ones are going to get complicated. what you're trying to do with this Airbnb is fine, you have your regulations. It always worries me though, when we go back to the site plan review, because you still have one person saying, no, I only want 2 cars parked there, and the other part says 3, and you can have an issue like that. You don't have it specific in the regulation.
But it's the same with the board, that's why a majority of the board will.
I'm trying, that's what, right, the majority of the board. I'm just trying to have it so that we have more definite regulations, that it doesn't, it's not a personal opinion, that makes some of these rules, regulations. This is new, I understand it's new, it's probably gonna have more changes as we go down the road. And there's that whole process of how these changes come. So being broad right now is okay to start, but it goes back to the fact I want to make sure that what's okay for him is okay for him, and it's not
Well, and that's all.
restrictive. Just because of a particular area. I'm trying to make the lines a little bit more black and white instead of too broad.
Mhm.
And I wanted everybody to really understand what you were trying to do with that particular one, because it is. And the next one was having the in-law apartments or whatever. The hard stuff I'm trying to figure out what you're gonna do is what the outcome's gonna be for one little line that gets changed. So that's why I wanted to break it down, so that everybody can understand it, because it still all has to be voted on in March.
Sure.
And if people don't understand it, it's not gonna get voted on with the proper knowledge, right? So I just wanna make sure we bring all that out for what we're trying to do.
I appreciate that. And let me just add one more thing that I'm not sure I was clear on. The conditional use permit ordinance does not automatically say there will be uses that you can do with a conditional use permit. You can't, raise your hand and say, hey, rather than conditional use permit with a special exception. Each use will have to be permitted by the voters separately. This year, the only use we're putting forward for a conditional use is Airbnb. In future years, we may look at it and say, you know what, a home office or some other kind of business, a law office is something that currently requires special exception and site plan review. That might be more appropriate for a conditional use permit, but we would have to go to the voters and they would have to make that change
Correct.
on our recommendation. Right, exactly. So it's not like a blanket conditional use permit that's gonna be available to everybody. It's just for the Airbnb.
Right. So you got next year, something else.
Yeah, we might add to it, we might not.
Paul Marshall, further, I have a question about, unfortunately, you use the term Airbnb, and that's certainly got a lot of negative press lately in some towns, because people are buying up houses and just renting them out for short-term rentals, and people who might want to live in town, young families starting out, things like that, can't find the residents. I don't think we're there yet, Francistown, North Conway, or, other tourist type place. Are there plans to be able to limit the number of residents that you would consider for this? Do you do that with a conditional use permit? Or as many people want to do this, theoretically do it?
Sorry, I think the only way you could do that is to zone. I'm not sure. I mean, this does not have any limitations on it. It's particular.
I actually don't think we could. I think that would be considered spot zoning and would be illegal. To say, once we reach 25 in town or whatever number we pick, that, we can't have any more. I don't think that's legal. Certainly we can ask council, but in my opinion,
Is there possible to limit the amount of days that a particular person is allowed?
any of those things can be, and that's part of the conditional use permit process, is we can say, you can do X.
You're gonna do less than 180 days, it's just another, you have to be able to keep your residency.
Right.
there.
Right now, the Airbnbs would be a maximum of 30 days.
It's saying each resident can only use for 30 days,
No,
or,
for the
30 days
use would
at a
be
time.
30 days consecutively.
right, but we're saying, trying to say so that 30 days, somebody, another 30 now.
It's feasible that somebody would have a property that they only use as an Airbnb. I
Right.
think that's.
That's what I was saying, I didn't know if there was some way to regulate
Yeah.
Airbnb to only be used for 180 days out of the year. And that would keep it over, or maybe you have 179 days, so that 180 days is more than half the year that are considered a rental, residence.
I think that we haven't proposed it this year, but it's something we could put in effect another year if it became an issue.
Right.
We see this.
Well, like I said, this is the beginning,
Yeah.
it's a working spot.
Yeah.
Because just like this, somebody could be renting it every 30 days,
Yeah.
now that house is available. But in order for them to be there, regular residency or yearly residency, it's 181 days that they have to stay in or something like that.
Right.
So,
We could put that in, or make that change in a future year if we see a problem developing.
Hey, Linda Coulthard, can you hear me? Linda Coulthard from the planning board. In following along the line of both of the two previous comments from Mr. Cameron and Mr. Marshall, my greatest concern with the proposal for short-term rentals as a new addition to the zoning ordinance as a conditional permit, as a conditional permit use, is the lack of specificity, lack of specific standards other than those shown A through F on the current proposal. My understanding, having read various legal views, that one of the greatest need for any ordinance that is going to be subject to conditional use permits is that the standards must be clear in the ordinance. You can't say, oh, we're gonna have short-term rentals and we're gonna give a conditional use permit and here's some vague things, that'll be fine. No, the standards must be clear in the ordinance. You can't use standards in either the site development regulations or the subdivision regulations to meet the hurdle of standards for a conditional use permit, because conditional use permits by New Hampshire law are only allowed to be issued for things within a zoning ordinance. An innovative land use control ordinance should designate which person or board will administer it. In this case, you're proposing the planning board. And that's, I understand that the reason was to streamline the process, which is what we want to do. But it's, again, it must include standards to guide the administrator. And I see that the standards are not clear. Adequate parking is provided on premises. That's not clear. What is adequate parking? I understand that you're going to say, oh, it's in the subdivision regulations. Oh, it's in the site development regulations. But the legislation is clear that the standards must be in the zoning ordinance. So the water, septic, and disposal systems are adequate to accommodate use. Again, it's not, if the standard is unclear, what is the standard? That's vague. The use will not adversely affect the quiet enjoyment of adjacent properties. That's a subjective clause. It's not a standard. The idea is to, as had been suggested from somebody else, you talk about setbacks and you talk about screening. It will not adversely affect value. That's vague. The site is appropriate location for use. That's not a standard. What makes a site location for adequate for use? One guy could say, well, my site is adequate for use, and the other guy could say, no, my site is adequate for use, and the board will to say yours is good and yours is not, but the standards must be in the zoning ordinance. So I'm not sure, it's my opinion that the current proposal is not ready to go forward. You can pass it, but it's going to get, I can see us paying lawyer bills again because it's not clear. In the same way that we lost a recent case because our buffer definition was considered unclear, the standards are not specific. Thank you.
Two things. One, most of the language in these standards is taken out of section 7, which is our special exception ordinance, so it is elsewhere in the ordinance. And secondly, we had all of these, I knew that you were concerned about the whether this met the legal standard that it should. And I specifically asked that question to our town council when I ran all these by him. And he said this was adequate and exactly what we should be doing for this proposal. Had no problem with it.
So we have,
We have town council opinion.
yeah.
That
The other,
would have been nice to know.
the other thing I want to mention is that currently we have no regulation for Airbnb. I mean, it's going on. So this is, and again, if we could look at some of these things as steps and progress, you know, maybe it's not as definitive as we ultimately want it to be, but it's better than what we have now, which is nothing.
Could I have a copy of the town council language on the record?
I can send you his email.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yes, come up to the mic.
I honestly agree with Linda. I think it's kind of a trap for the unwary to have kind of vague standards that are subjective. And I think you could find trouble. Because one of your obligations would be not to be arbitrary. It seems like a greater time and effort that you spend either to limit the rules you can make for what purpose. And you also have to remember there can be constitutional issues, taking the property, and all that. And so it is not sufficient, I believe, to have just or at least you just have laws and standards. Which I'm not saying you're not take or anything like that. But going down the road, how people look at them and how they apply them to the document. And so, rush the. It seems like more. It makes sense. So the fact that I think the subjective, that you may not like it, or feel that it affects the future.
Thank you. Are there any Zoom callers weighing in on this? Other comments? Okay, we're gonna move on to the next article, which is Article 3-B, conditional use permits. I think Sarah has kind of defined some of that pretty well. Other questions? Or comments? So this would allow conditional use permits to be used for specific ordinances that have been voted on. Is that your question? Comments?
Linda Corradigan, just to say again, the application procedures haven't been created yet. It would be, in my mind, when doing these types of zoning ordinance changes that require changes to be done in other areas of the site development or subdivision regulations, especially when they're a new thing, it would have behooved the board to prepare that in advance, so that at least when it should it get approved at town meeting, there's something ready to go, and it won't take a whole another year to get whatever regulations you want to have made.
So you're talking about the forms, create forms. Okay, next item, 3.11.1, ADUs, which are accessory dwelling units. We currently have a regulation for attached ADUs. We are proposing a couple changes. The first is the description, an accessory dwelling unit entirely contained within or attached to a single-family principal dwelling unit shall be allowed without additional requirements for lot size, frontage, or space limitations, provided that the following conditions are met. The conditions are as they are stated presently in the ordinance, except for item E, and we are suggesting that the language of State of New Hampshire Subsurface Systems Bureau, a subsequent agency, be added to item E, just to update the terminology for that agency that approves septic systems. So the new item E would read, the sewage disposal system designed for residents, either existing or as it may be modified, shall have been approved by the town building inspector and by the State of NH Subsurface Systems Bureau or subsequent agency. If they change their name again, that's the, the cover. In case of conversions, a copy of such approval shall be filed with the planning board prior to any exterior or interior alterations. And that is the proposed change for that particular ordinance. Do you have any questions or comments?
I keep having a hard time discerning what's coming out and what's going in. I know you keep telling me that it's clear, but it's not clear. So, well, it's changed. I get it that it's changed. What I'm saying is it's not clear to me. You're asking me to look at the existing language and then figure out in my head what's being struck. Because there's nothing struck. I don't have a document that shows me what's coming up. I have a document that's showing me the new language, which is, so maybe I'm slightly dyslexic, but no, it's hard for me to tell what's being changed specifically. I'm seeing, I get it that it's changed, but it's not clear to me.
Yeah, in this case, the description of ADUs and change the wording to be more specific, and then the change of the Bureau agency is updated.
Isn't it the same agency, just the name change?
Just the name change, yeah. Do we have any comments from the board? Anyone? Okay, moving on to 3.11.2, ADUs detached. This is an entirely new section, which allows detached accessory dwelling units with conditions. And the conditions include no larger than 1,000 square feet. Property has to conform to all the zoning requirements. Accessory dwelling building conforms to all the setback requirements of the district. And again, the sewage disposal system needs to meet the State of New Hampshire Bureau's requirements. All required road building permits need to be on file with the town of Francistown. Either the ADU or the principal dwelling unit shall constitute the domicile of the owner of the lot. So the owner must live in either the original or the detached ADU. The owner shall demonstrate that one of the units is his or her principal place of residence. ADU shall not be rented as transient quarters, and the right to rent or sublet shall not be permitted for periods of less than 30 days. In other words, it cannot be turned into a vacation rental or short-term rental unit. Adequate off-street parking shall be provided per zoning article 8. Parking space as defined in the zoning article 8. ADU shall maintain an aesthetic continuity with the existing structures in regard to style, color, and exterior materials. The ADU shall be under the same ownership as the principal dwelling unit and may not be subdivided from the land of the principal dwelling unit unless all requirements for subdivision of the underlying zoning district are met. So this is for, again, for a detached ADU, does not need to be attached to the original unit. Does anyone have comments or questions?
Sarah.
Yes,
I don't know if you want to get public comment first, but this is one area where, town council did point out that we made, we had an oversight, an error. And in the original ordinance, the, attached ADU, it says single family dwelling, and we did not include that same language in the new ordinance. He was wondering if that was our intent. I will tell you, speak as one member of our committee, because we haven't met since, but I think it was our intent that it be exactly the same requirement. Which, when he mentioned that, it also brought up that we did not put anywhere in this that it's only one ADU per lot. So I think I would like to propose that we correct the oversight and add as A, and then everything else will move down a letter. There is only one single family principal dwelling and no more than one accessory dwelling unit per lot or on the lot. I think that was our intent in the beginning, but it's not spelled out clearly, and I think it should be.
Exactly.
Right.
The other thing is the ADU is no larger than 1,000 square feet potentially put in of living space.
Yes, I think that's reasonable, of finished living space.
Exactly.
Yeah, flag is the color in the real estate world.
Should we tell people why we are proposing this, the intent of this?
Yeah, basically, this started because we heard from a number of people in town in our public hearings, in our public forums, and in just chatting with people, that there was an interest in having an alternate form of, a way of creating housing for our kids, for our parents, for caretakers even. And that maybe it would make sense to have, that not everybody has a big house that they can create an ADU out of. Some people have modest houses that still have the need to have the kids somewhere. Or, so it makes sense. And I will say, if you're a planning board member, you're bombarded by all sorts of state initiatives of good planning things to be added. And alternative housing is a big thing in the state of New Hampshire now, trying to keep young kids in the state. And I think we all as a group feel that's really important, to keep our young kids in town. And as I'm getting older, I'm kind of liking the idea of caretakers. So I think it gives, it's alternate housing options for people, which we have heard from both above in the state, from the people of Francistown and Sun, that's really important. So this to us made a lot of sense. Now, I also want to be clear that the way this is written, because I've had a couple questions on it, you can have a barn or an outbuilding that's bigger than 1,000 square feet and just create 1,000 square feet in it of gross living area with this. So if you've got a giant barn, you can have a small apartment in your barn, or the second floor of your garage, or whatever works for yours. Also, point out this is a substantive change to what we had proposed in our notices and in our postings. So if we're going to make these changes, we should A, vote on making these changes, and B, we'll need to take it to a second public hearing. By law, we can't just make these changes and take it to the voters, we have to go to the second. Yeah,
One of the letters that came in the communications that Karen noted was from a fellow who himself does not live in Francistown, but visits his children and grandchildren who live here. And I found it very interesting. He served for 18 years in Fairfax County, Virginia, as a planning board member. And while he admits that Francistown is not like where he was from, yet where he was from used to be very rural and had a high open space feeling to it. And over the years, the zoning ordinance seemed to keep things how they were, which is what zoning ordinances always seem to do. They try and keep things present, although a planning board's job is to plan for the future. He offered some suggestions for us to think about, thoughts for us to think about, in particular to the detached ADU, because his observation from where he has lived is that good intentions sometimes take on a life of their own and create changes that we had not anticipated and didn't really wish they had. So what he talks about with ADUs is he understands the attractiveness of wanting them, but that there ought to be ways to at least initially limit how many there are that are separate from a detached. So to me, an attached ADU makes sense. It's not really going to change the way our town looks if they're attached. They're either inside the building already, or it's like they have a little attachment. People are, all our houses have attachment. They start out at the Cape, and they get the L, and they get the other part, and they get the third part. Attachments are a normal part of New England architecture. But creating a standalone dwelling unit, which a detached ADU is, while it's a great idea, it's going to give the appearance of two separate homes on a lot, which might not be a bad thing, but if everybody can have one everywhere, it's going to create a huge difference in the feel of Francistown. And my concern is that it's, again, a little bit rushed to go forward to it without having debated whether or not you want to have them on large parcels only. The suggestion of consider having them on larger parcels only, not just our standard 3-acre parcel. And actually, when I read our current proposed language, I can't tell if you're only allowing them on 3-acre parcels because it doesn't say it in the text. I gather it from looking at table 2, but
It says that the property conforms to all zoning requirements. Conforming on 3 acres.
so what you're saying is that any existing non-conforming lot cannot have a detached accessory building? I guess I would rather have it say it in there, but I'm supposed to intuit it.
It says it right there, it must be a conforming lot.
So it doesn't say, well, I didn't read, it doesn't say a conforming lot, but that it must conform, so just check.
The lot must conform to all zoning requirements. Which actually, if we end up ever making an area of town and 10 acre zoning is required, this law will still be working for that. If we have an area that requires only 2 acre zoning, this law will work for that. Right now, our zoning requirements are 3 acres, 300 feet frontage, 2 buildable acres. And this says right here in B, must conform to all zoning requirements of the district. So when you say it doesn't say that, I disagree, it does.
So is the village zoning district got a smaller footprint?
No,
Or just not conforming. We could add must be a conforming lot as specified in
The
zoning.
rural district?
blah, 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 blah.
We could modify that, we have to anyways, so to make it
Yeah,
clear.
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
We have to make modifications anyways.
Jimmy's speaking to the microphone.
I have a question from the audience. Will the change to the ADU detached section specifying a limit of 1 ADU per lot also cover
Yes.
attached ADUs?
Yes, that was another thing that one of our other,
no.
that was another thing that one of our other incoming pieces of email suggested. And that's another thing that I saw that other towns were clear to put into their detached dwelling unit section is that if you have a detached ADU, you cannot have an attached ADU.
That's good.
So is that in here? It's not in
Because
here.
under the attached ADU, the language reads, there is only one residential structure on the lot and only one ADU within or attached to that structure. That is not being changed, that will stay. So
Right,
yes,
I'm talking
the
about,
existing, I'm answering the question that Jamie just said. The existing ordinance only allows for one ADU per structure, and that will not be changed. Sorry, Libby, you had a question too.
they were asking it about attached only.
No, the question was, does the change to the proposed change to the detached ADU ordinance also affect the attached section of the ADU? And I think you've answered the question that no, that the attached section already dictates only one per lot.
The only thing is, it says specifically within or attached to that structure.
Right. So that's what
And
makes me.
so that. If it was not attached, would that language carry forward?
So if you've already got one in your map, you can't have a second ADU.
So the, we were just talking about adding and having another hearing to add single family dwellings for this detached. That would be used for single family, and have a two family, that's a detached ADU. And one ADU per lot is another item that we're gonna add to this, as well as the 1,000 square feet of finished living space on the living area. Wood. So those three items we just discussed, revising the 3.11.2 detached section.
The neighbor that has to contain the food to the property conforms to all zoning requirements, comma, is on the conforming lot, comma, and the accessory building conforms to all setback requirements.
People not knowing what's going on, I'm always there.
I mean, that's, I get it in at home because you like to do the that's why I think the rules so that.
Other questions or comments from the public?
That
No, it's not what it's doing.
This says, shall maintain aesthetic continuity with principal dwelling unit in regard to the style of the exterior materials. So if they have a pink house, they can go to the pink house. I just looked at it, the existing ordinance does say, outside, maybe shall itself, and instead of continuing the principal dwelling within the existing ordinance now. We actually, really, that's what we rejected, but that's too big. So we added in the relative kind of stuff, and then actually we did good, but it was, and we got on foot with it, and I feel understand about, people are useful, but I think part of our concern with allowing it to use the pavilions was the baby stuff. And we felt that if we asked people to have look like the rest of the property, it would be less of a. It doesn't allow you down to 55. You don't have to change the bar. But it's not going to be help. You can leave it with the existing. Well, I mean, but my, yeah, yeah, just give us a second. Okay. Let's see, we're on Shannon's dispatch. Article 7. Accessory dwelling unit. A residential living unit that and striking is within or attached to a single family dwelling unit. These residential living that provide living facilities for one or more persons, including provisions for cooking and sanitation on the same household land as the central dwelling unit in if the companies.
So in this change, we're just striking the words is within or attached to a single family dwelling. And And then there's a change to table 2 in the zoning, striking lots of 3 acres or more. This is striking lots of more than 3 acres. Dwelling unit in detached building, and it's not permitted. And then the rest is an addition, right? Yeah. So the addition would be detached, lots of acres or more. And, yes. Okay, so it looks like the ADU detached, there are some changes and we'll need to revise and come back to that one. Moving on to description of shoreline district. This is just revising the description of the shoreline district. The change is in item A. And we're going to be striking the words pond B and adding ponds over 10 acres. There's no more pond B, sorry. And item B is all land within 50 feet of the mean high water level of any other pond and all perennial streams and rivers shown on the surface waters predicated wetland map in Appendix 6 of the Natural Resources Inventory of the 2013 Conservation Plan, and that replaces verbiage that has our tables of the 1989 waters. And that's the change to that description of shoreline systems.
I know that the board is proposed change for 2-8.6.2 description of shoreline district as read without further.
Second. Yes. So it's basically updating the information in here. So the change is one of the items describes all the ponds.
But there's a change in the distance.
It's not a change, nothing else has changed. Did you vote? I second.
I vote in favor.
I have, yes. Is 7.7.1 landscaping conducting businesses where primary activity is off-site.
We'll have discussion.
Let me just read language here. consultant for the town building accepted this addition accommodates businesses that do not fall within 3.9.2. Specifically, where the 2 employees and 1 vehicle. So 7.7.1, landscaping contracting businesses where primary activities are. Landscaping contracting or other businesses where the primary activity is conducted off-site may be established by special exception, provided they are appropriate for the district, appropriate for the size and dimension of the lot, and provided the use is on a conforming lot of at least 3 acres with a minimum of 300 feet of frontage. Setbacks and buffering shall be adequate for the type of use. Site plan review approval must be obtained from the planning board. So, yes, and so just for, if you don't meet the standards of 3.9.2, just, we have in place in our ordinance under special exceptions for this particular industry, we have hotels, motels, restaurants, light industry, it's after light industry, and so that would get down to that. We sawmills, veterinary clinics, all sorts of other stuff, but this particular one, was really specific, and I think in the past, we've sort of felt that it fell under businesses, as not like a business, but it really doesn't meet that description. It's, yeah, it doesn't. So that is the particular question. Comments? Someone question? Yes. Zoning board approval, and it does, that others do get notified. There's a whole other process you have to go through, it also requires site plan approval of the planning board, which is, there's a lot of stuff to do. And, we also require public comment, so it's a rigorous process. Is your business considered outside of the then they bring them all home. Now, is that considered a business? The thing is, we have a resident town who made it happen to just do that. He got that money, machine, to serve in the whole neighborhood. So, at what point do you say, hey, this is ridiculous, the residents of the area, and you're running the business too? To get to the specific, I know they come to this town,
What's good in operation is all going to be held. One will do this. Okay, so I just said, you know, what are you going to do, what can we do about this? Don't need 3.9. So if you have more than 2 employees and more than a vehicle, or should not requiring that you're reporting not incidental to residential use. And maybe you have a lot, and this is all of it in that lot. So it's the next level. And if you have that level, you have to go to the zoning board of adjustment for special exception. You have to meet the legal requirements of that special exception. Then you go to the planning board, the site plan review. If you look at site plan review regulations, there's a lot in there, and that goes through quite extensive safety, health, the butters get noticed, it's pretty expensive to get this, but it's a step. It's about 3.9.
Because it has more employees than 3.9.1 and more vehicles. Okay. So 3.9.1 is for under 2 and under, and 1 vehicle. This is for over 2 and more than 1 vehicle. So it's a different type of criteria that is described here. It's a more expensive business endeavor, and so therefore it has to go through more processes.
So not really about the different levels of nuisance and just kind of the signal that the sort of residential and farming and things like that. And then this is the conditions, design conditions. And then the third is permitted by section 7. 3.9.9 falls into that second category. But it's permitted as long as you get into
Okay. Next item is the definition of buffers. This addition is replacing the definition of section 8, provides, within section 8, provides specificity for residents to understand the definable description of a vegetative buffer and affords town boards flexibility in reviewing cases for site plan, special exceptions, and select board rulings. So the entire thing will be replaced, is that what? Okay. So the definition of buffer proposed reads, the buffer shall provide a year-round screen to minimize adverse visual noise, dust, or other impacts. Buffers may range in widths from 10 to 25 feet and be composed of a mixture of landscaping materials depending on the need to screen the proposed use from adjacent use. Buffers shall have a minimum height of 6 feet or be composed
maintain the site over 3 growing seasons. That is the definition proposed. Any questions?
So during the buffer, so just make sure I'm clear on this, the buffer, that means on the property, the businesses would have a bit, buffer, if on their property, not using the father's buffer, correct? Just want to make sure, right now. Don't want to think, well, you're gonna make sure that I have a buffer right here. That's clear, business, or if there's a
Others are required.
So no one says, well, I have a buffer, see right here, well, no, where's the property?
It's the on the lot.
Also on the business or whatever it is. I just want to make that clear. Not really clear.
Well, this is the definition, it's not going to be the whole ordinance about what's required. The other change in this definition is that it specifies the flexibility with the 10 to 25 feet, recognizing that not every situation needs 25 feet, but maybe 10 and others may need 12.
Now, I'm going to go on how that determined? If you need to, if it's 10 feet or 25 feet. The my opinion might be, I can really need that 25 feet, but I have a business next to me. So the subject to the question. Part of the beauty of our ordinance is that it allows for flexibility in land use with oversight. So the boards that are responsible for defining these buffers, and it depends, it could be, John Campbell, if it's a building inspector who's done it, it could be the planning board, it could be the zoning board. But there's a process in each of these ordinances that sets where it's defined as appropriate. And to me, part of the ordinance is that it doesn't have to have any sites that, it's that, hopefully competent and intelligent people that do that, that call it all the time. But that's an assumption, you're assuming that people are going to have that. No, it's there's no set standard. Right, there's, and that's what it is, because what's a use that requires, very little buffering should not be under the same rules as a use that may require a lot. So this adds the flexibility of the saying to each, moving board, whether it's a planning board, zoning board, or selectmen, to determine what is the appropriate use, without for that use, at the time of that device. Interesting. Yep. Okay, item 2.5, obnoxious uses. There is one change to this, and that is the addition of the words "and forestry" in the last sentence, so that would now read customary agricultural and forestry uses are expressly excluded from these provisions. Any questions or comments? Yes. So, when I got the payment, what is meaning of customer? What does that mean?
when you cut, and most of your agricultural operations are required to follow best management practices from DES to make sure that it's something groundwater, you can not storm runoff, if they're not moving the soil, if they're applying the fertilizer properly, in order to keep the pesticide license fulfilled, those next to prevent the cows from dying, they have to get recertified all the time. So there are, do I have to stick them out? Do I know this is this? Yes. Do I follow some myself? Yes. So I hear you. They are readily available. Okay, they are regularly used. And if someone gets something, or extension agents or work with the state, if there's a question,
It's silviculture. It's the time we're not knowing.
Somebody is operating in a logging business, does that meet the definition of forestry? So then you say yes. So if they open that, if they're doing processing things, processing that wood on site, bringing something in, driving a logging truck on a narrow road, that's acceptable. That's putting public safety and health at risk.
So forestry, I think is, in my opinion, there's a difference between forestry is when you're logging, whether it's you're doing it yourself or if someone else is doing it, cutting trees, just pulling them out, that's all part of forestry. It can be, for wildlife habitat management, maybe, that's all part of its management of the forest. But I do think that someone who is hauling logs into a piece of property that has, they're not doing the forestry on their property, they're not conducting, they're not doing a bigger logging operation on their land, but they're hauling in, cutting out the hunt, in my opinion, that doesn't fall into forestry. And that's just my opinion.
And if you're active, I agree with you. That's how I look at it too. Because someone who's doing it on their own land, doing this, that's, you're doing wildlife management, that's awesome. But if you're trucking it in, constantly trucking it in, my concern was, well, wait a minute, some person, the road's being beat up, and it's a narrow road. I'm concerned someone's gonna get to a serious accident. That's my concern. Again, that's seen me as being a public safety guy.
That concludes our changes that I propose. Yes.
Should we vote on this first?
Yeah.
Each one.
Okay. We'll go through each of these items and need a motion. So, we want 1.7 short-term rentals. Yeah, I need a roll call. Discussion. Wait, hang on.
Anytime there's a motion in a second, you're allowed to have discussion on it. Discussion. I just, again, I just want to remind the board that it's my opinion that the 3.17 short-term rentals fail to adequately meet the needs for being clear on the standards which would have to be in existence before conditional use permit could be issued.
Hardwick in favor, Dixon in favor.
Fitzgerald opposed.
But the language will have to say, approved by the.
Conditional use permits. Yeah. The one. Article 3 dash B. Is, I have a second. I have a second. Yeah. Discussion. Vote. Start with you, Marcia.
Dixon in favor, Hardwick in favor.
Motion goes to voters. Next item is attached ADUs, change the language, 2.1, 1.1, ADUs attached. The motion.
I would say, hold 3.1.1, that has the changes. That has the changes before we bring it.
Yeah.
No, let's just go. If for whatever reason, I went back and decide not to go forward and attach, but you still want to change the first ADU. So that's why I'm suggesting that since
Wait. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
In fact, both of these should have one article, article one, things 3.1.1, one happens and one doesn't. We're gonna have a list of them. So we're gonna have it in one warrant article. I like that.
Motion.
Carol seconded. Is it too late? The motion.
On both 3.1.1 and point 2. Both of the changes.
Dixon in favor. Hardwick in favor.
Well, then, the change of definition, and that seems like that's gonna be. Yeah. And 7.1, that's the contact businesses by calling out to the town site. I move that we accept the changes after. The amended. The amended.
Can you read the amended? It says,
I'll second.
Dixon in favor. Dixon in favor. Hardwick in favor.
Still in favor? In favor?
I'm in favor.
Passes. Next one is the definition of complex. Second.
Dixon in favor. Hardwick in favor.
Okay. Change there and policy.
Make a motion to move forward with that, take it to voters if I need it.
Second. So,
Dixon in favor. Hardwick in favor.
Sarah in favor. Not to be favor. I in favor. That here. The proposed application. By the 3.9.1 business based on. This article. Pictures November 29th, 2021. That Brooks Grant on voters, and it's weapon in accordance with seven five. 675 amended to Benton zoning ordinance 3.91 income businesses. Placed on official ballot and prepared by town meeting. Languages are to include the adoption of the agenda. Opposed, petitioners for Francis Town. Ordinance as follows. Section 3.9 of that in business to repeal paragraphs C and G. Most of the adverse effects listed in C are prohibited in section 3.5 of noxious uses, and the terms excessive and frequent are subjective. Item G unfairly restricts small businesses owners as a separate class of citizens. That's the description of the petition. Received several pages of signatures. And it's been filed with the next town clerk. Is anyone here representing the petition would like to speak? Yes. No? Okay.
Is anybody on Zoom? Okay.
You can hear us?
No, not everybody using my monitor to speak clearly, they can't hear, it's like a mess.
We have to use the microphone. Could they have hear me now, Jimmy?
They should be able to hear you. I haven't made anything to comment about that.
Okay.
Public first, right?
Okay, so now we have a comment and question on this one.
Just want to make two comments.
First of all, I recommend that I give that some of the positions you guys
Yes, correct, this mission, right.
This seems, I think it's a step, no one's ordinance, if there's a business that has, for example, a logging, a dump truck, an excavator. We set that diesel truck up, that I know for a fact. Guess what? That means the smoke going to the neighbor. I got a neighbor that diesel truck, I can smell it. Right? And then if they get an excavator or whatever, you're gonna get a lot of humidity. So I think this is the way it should stay, it should not. Just for protection of the neighbors. And this, gee, there goes, I'm fairly such small business owners, separate class of citizens. Is he a knucklehead? He's a resident of this town. He's not a second class citizen, whether he owns a business or not. You know, this is, that's what they should say, that's my opinion. I just want to make a comment, because it's a warrant article, we can't modify it, it has to go to town meeting to the voters as it is, and, but, that's why I think that.
required by law. Well, it's required by law, and also the vote will come before the town meeting, and this is the opportunity for people to understand what the issues are, both pro and con. It's your turn or your time to talk your mind. And it's anybody's in the town's turn to talk their mind so that when they vote, they'll know what it even means. That's the scary part.
That's good. So, my comment is section C, the acknowledges use, part of that, the biggest difference I see is the one that causes an essence petition. Excessive increase in traffic, I think it's limits by heavy traffic activity. So, we need to be consistent. And then, subjective terms, I heard, Sarah mentioned earlier that you want to be able to have flexibility. So you can't say exactly, can't see 85 decibels at 8 hour pound average or something like that. The study would say, but there has to be flexibility. And so you could probably go doing that, sections that are subjective. Building inspector to determine that. And I agree with what you said earlier, I can't believe that somehow a petition would go to the town that has this kind of about second class citizens. It's unfortunate that there can be no argument of this petition that goes to the that's not good. The one thing that this board is required to vote on whether it's support or not support any petition or article that is concerned again. That's how you answer it. So even though we don't have a discussion, we say we don't agree that we're going to pull it. It's not to prevent the votes. We do have it on the review to the point of the vote that does not support. And the vote that does not support. It's just the committee, because it's the budget committee and the select board that goes to the meeting, and that's the committee that goes to the zoning. And I don't know if all of you, have attended the public meeting back in December, how we were discussing some unpopular changes to 3.9 and 3.92. But at that public hearing, it's currently, if you own the kind of equipment that's being regulated under 3.9.2, but you don't have a business, you can have other people want, private ones want, but everything is objectionable. But you're allowed to do it because you don't start a business. As soon as you say it's a business, immediately you're not allowed to do it unless you have a permit. And that's where the second class of citizen response comes from. It appears unqualified or unjust application of use simply by the fact that you say you have a business. It's not the same. You have the same limit as the guy across the street. The guy that's on the truck from work, if he has a mobile truck, he can park it on Main Street. Citizens in business, that truck is not literally allowed to park on Main Street. That's where the suggestion to repeal paragraph 2 comes from. Is that there is a different way of treating people. Because based on the fact that we're forced to have a person to do it as they want it, because they have another job with people, so they don't have to have a business, or if they have to find equipment, and they find it. You guys talked about 3.9.1,
the changes to them. Or no? So would it be appropriate place for someone instead of just coming with a petition to do the go to the planning board meeting to address discussing this and present those ideas instead of circumnavigating the document we haven't had that.
As well as the committee that have been working on these changes for months. They were also open to public process.
But they would want to be on the agenda.
I think if anybody wanted to do something like that, if they want to get on the agenda, just.
I acknowledge them and it's just like, yeah.
No, I haven't.
I'm not saying it's illegal, I'm saying the first step would have been, in my opinion, to come and address it with the planning board. So, I'm gonna ask you to ask. So, my name's Mary Murphy, I'm Foster, I'm gonna ask the board to not support this amendment for a couple of reasons. But first, I'd like to ask any members of the board to sign the petition to recuse themselves from voting. Well, that would eliminate any perception of conflict of interest between the board. So let's the other gentleman, I think when it comes to repealing, paragraph G. I think that the work that we brought up, some of the home front work, putting outside of their house. Well, it's further indicated in the in-home business, section, you're not objecting to, either a business owner or a, person bringing a one truck home, which has got a fleet of trucks in the front yard. That's what this is trying to protect against, and I think that's a reasonable protection, in a residential community. If you want to try and appeal to the town to get a zone change to commercial and detached and have to submit to all the fees and inspections and other requirements to go along with rezoning your property as commercial, I'm okay with that because you're following the rules. But I think that the town does have an obligation to all of its taxpayers and citizens to protect property values and property rights. And this is a state that has a view tax. And so, we, in my situation, we had our view obstructed on more than one occasion by very heavy equipment. We're talking, very big excavators and dump trucks and everything else. The folks that are spending through the town, our next door neighbor's property, and quite frankly, it's offensive. They're asking, or they're stating, as you said, one thing is small business owners with separate class of citizens. Again, I'm asking you to dismiss that concern because, as I mentioned, you're providing for that. I think the town has done a good job in distinguishing between in-home businesses, home-based businesses, commercial and industrial businesses. You have a whole section, that section 7 tries to tease out, and just added to it, different types of small businesses. There's no discrimination in this town against small businesses. I'm a small business owner. I don't feel discriminated against. I think you've done a really good job in this section of the ordinances. They're asking to repeal section C, or paragraph C rather. I do agree with them that using excessive and frequent, might be construed as subjective, and so I would objection to removing those words. I would only object if you remove the increases in traffic flows and also the visits by heavy trucks and equipment, because that protects again the residential character of an in-home business. So that's all I have to say, but I would ask you to use good judgment and not support this particular precedent. You guys have listed all the letters that were received by the board, just so that everybody knows that you also, all members of the planning board receive a copy of those letters ahead of time, so that it's not just that you've indicated that you're going on the record, all members of the board have heard from all the people who took the time to write us letters.
Yes, that's correct. The entire board has copies of all the letters that we've received, and they will be part of the record as well.
I had a question regarding the subjective language, and the intent of removing it. If the intent to remove it is followed through on, is there an implication that we should replace it with more specific language, or just remove it and leave it out?
Petition has to remove the entire.
I'm just gonna go on record as saying, subjective language, that I'm not sure what the alternative is, right? So if you put in specifics around decibels and particulates or what have you, who polices that? Who polices it? How do you police it? Are you asking neighbors to police it? Which is not the best. So just something to continue to think about as the discussion. Thank you.
Switch it up. There's something for tonight, that's in this attorney law. And tonight we've heard some thoughtful discussion on some of the zoning ordinance that was brought before the planning board. And one of the areas of concern was home-based businesses. But unfortunately, in my opinion, I do not think we've looked at this issue potentially at the deepest level for the betterment of all. We're now in a position where we decided whether to keep our current home-based business zoning ordinance or eliminate 391C. My personal feeling is that proper zoning is important for a town to develop in such a way that its character is preserved. This is true historically in Francistown, and it's certainly true now. We live in a beautiful New England village, which we love for its rural character in the village town. We're thankful for the planning that our forefathers have done to make Francistown what it is today. I was told when we discussed home-based businesses that Francistown is a multi-use town and has been since inception. That means that home-based business, commercial endeavors, and residential living stand side by side throughout the town. The Rules and Regulation Committee of the Planning Board tried to look at changing the current home-based zoning ordinance with an eye that could be done, keeping the multi-use concept in place. At the last planning board meeting, that proposal was tabled due to lack of support. In hindsight, perhaps we might also have been wise to look at our town from a village, residential, and rural perspective. In our rural community, we seldom get complaints at the select board level from neighbors about home-based commercial activity. Maybe that is because there is more land that shelters from views of commercial activity in the rural setting, or simply because the neighbors in those areas have lived that way over time and are comfortable with the multi-use concept. It is in the more densely populated areas that the current zoning regulation comes into effect. Perhaps we would be wiser to regulate the rural areas substantially more leniently than we do the more densely populated areas. It is too late to do a thorough study at this point on this issue, but I feel it would be a worthy exercise for Francistown to consider in the future. We would need collectively to determine what constitutes a residential area as far as density is concerned, grandfathering current use, along with other important considerations. Such thinking could eliminate the unfair difference between zoning for personal use and commercial use vehicles. In the meantime, I think it would be short-sighted to do away with 391C and G in our zoning ordinance, as these provisions affect the village district as well as the rural district. Keeping the village district intact is important visually and could be negatively effective and change the look of our town if we eliminate these provisions. As a consequence, perhaps the overall town property value might decrease. If we wish in the future to change this regulation, we should do so with a thorough study that would benefit everyone. This should take time and we would be opinion over how we currently look at zoning, but it could be done and potentially that's why there may be other ways to change our zoning, but we need more time to come up with a logical solution. I enjoy diversity of opinion. It takes hours to live in this beautiful community and make it what it is today. I respect all of you and strive to do that in an open, non-judgmental way. Plants and species are the fabric of our society, an important threat to sound development in the future. We all need to have patience at this emotional jungle. Educate the limitations of its decision and considering what is best for this business. I would like to stress the journey I have that is one of this petition to really of what do you do, what replaces this, that we might consider we have to go to a public hearing. And then is a public hearing process that we might get together and think about an alternative to come up to active development. This affects everything in every sector, and it's especially interesting. I understand what you're saying about but that is a very long conversation and very involved. I do think that in order to reflect what we've heard from all sectors and advance the home and home business capabilities, we can and should. One of the second house there, one of the second house notice, we resurrect and decide our original people. So I think probably first we need to do the petition one. I do draft some language for 3.1.2, different than what we proposed before, but I got it's legal to decide to take an article that was tabled for public hearing and then bring it up and work on it. I think that's illegal. Not the same one. Not the same language. So I have it. We have to follow public. There are rules that require specific things in general. For how many days for an article or the public change in the ordinance has to be known to the public. And the dates for that have passed for the the first public hearing on that hearing, second public hearing is actually Monday, January 17th. So as long as we start the notice process now, have the notice on the website by Thursday, January 6th, we are absolutely in compliance with it. We started the process so early, just in case something like this happened, we give ourselves the option. So at the same meeting where we
we need this public hearing for that, because the data public hearing on the inherit and what the ordinance.
Which apparently some members of the planning board know about, but other members of the planning board don't know about. There's been no vote of the planning board because nobody knew about it except some people. But it's not true. I didn't know about it.
Nobody did. I sent it to Karen today and a copy to Sarah today to print,
That's the problem.
because I just finished it.
That's wicked. I'm sorry, that appears to me to be public, to be doing planning board business outside of the public meeting.
No, it's not. I received an email from Becky asking me to print copies of something. Karen received an email from Becky saying, I've been working on this, I'd like to present it tonight. Neither of those things are illegal or out of the scope of a single board member's interest in advancing something for planning board consideration. There's been no outside discussion of this in that.
There's been no I was surprised as hell.
I think we need to talk about application and then close public hearing and then discuss the. Okay. So I'm making a motion on petition. I can make a motion on petition. The motion is to present to the voters a petition back to the town.
So whether or not we support it. Right.
Motion is to recommend the petition language as presented to the town by town meeting.
Are we voting that we are in favor of this amendment, or are we voting that we're gonna present? You have to.
So I didn't use the list together, that's correct.
What we're voting on is whether the board supports the petition. Will be, put forward. Regardless.
Yeah.
So we are voting on whether we recommend the petition or we support the petition. As favor of the petition or opposed? That is the vote. Not favor of the petition, say no.
Just state it again.
Is whether the planning board recommends the petition as presented to the town regarding 3.921. Amendment 3.921 in-home businesses.
So not in favor, but we don't support the petition.
If you're not in favor, you do not support the petition. If you're not in favor, you support the petition as written. What's that? Oh, 22 is if you sign.
That's right.
Anyone who signs the petition does not by law have to refuse from voting on the petition.
Wait a second. Let's talk about that.
Not in favor. Dixon opposed.
Not in favor of opposed, means the same thing.
the public hearing.
Stay if you want. If anybody wants to see this, stay, please.
Okay, I just want to say that, we're going to continue the hearing on that. No, that's too good. We need to move it out
The first motion for you today is the public, this public hearing will continue for the articles that. For the ADU.
Actually, don't you have to replace the name?
It's going to happen to, as noticed, January 18th. Any article discussed today in this public hearing that did not go from this public hearing, did not come out of this public hearing, if you vote to go forward as written, or warrant article is automatically as decided to January 18th as noticed. Because it has to be that many days away. It happens to be the day, it happens to be the time. It's when we notice it, it's when it's continued. Anything else you do is different. But the motion that you have for that public hearing is to continue the
on and, also, according to the state calendar, the last day of the planning board is going to have a final public hearing on about the must also determine final form at that meeting. So, tonight, I want to the final public hearing, except we made the final tweaks to the
Right.
and actually be as late as January 31st to hold a public hearing on any other ordinance that comes forward, as long as we don't make any other changes. That's why it's in the law, that's the date of
Yeah, we'll continue next. Yeah. One of the things, the Zoom, according to Jamie, is not really working for the participants. So I guess the question is, moving forward, are we going to open it to a hybrid meeting or just keep it? The Zoom is not successful, according to Jamie. They can't hear what's going on. So it would appear that in the future, we should decide whether we're going to continue to have a hybrid meeting where they can't hear, or we won't have a Zoom. That should be part of the.
Okay, I moved it. What it has here, the person that's trying to, and so that in our own meeting, we will be here, but everybody speaks out.
So, are you putting up a motion?
So, that's my motion is to not have a hybrid meeting on the issue.
I think I said it. So Karen, what's the matter? Thank you, sir.
You're right. You want to have it on Zoom and then you have it. Recognize that you watch us, but if you choose to join by Zoom, you are giving up the right to speak, that you have to be able to speak. Is that right? Something like that with, votes. And when the board is present, in person, it has to be in person now. Anybody on Zoom doesn't have to vote, doesn't vote. So they're not voting. The Zoom. And
Is there any way to see the technology they use for them?
I know of no way that any human has ever heard of a hybrid actually.
I don't think if they don't, they can't hear it. There's no point watching us. Shake our heads and all of that, they couldn't even hear our lips. So if it's not working, then why have it? I don't get it.
Are you hearing that nobody can hear who's saying something, or just people saying that
It's been nothing but telegram.
But
Telegram. The microphone don't work for the mask, nobody speaks clear.
okay. Well, I don't think that's gonna be changed by the ability to defense on TV, but the mask and mask, and you've got the word, I don't know how you not.
We got that some other language, but it sounds great.
So if you want to continue, I just want to double check, who I see something asking if we have continued with this public hearing, I think we just voted on that. Yes, do that.
We haven't voted yet, have we?
But we continue it so that because we're going to have to re-discuss the ADU section.
Yeah, but did we vote on it? Let's vote on it. On the-
Is this Zoom issue, something we need to vote on?
Yeah.
Why?
We don't necessarily.
But it's featured, so if we're gonna go back to the town offices, then it's the town office.
I don't think that's safe. We're gonna have town offices absolutely full. We've got, 20, at least 20 people in this room. Plus all 19 people that are on Zoom. And you've got Omicron spreading.
Yeah.
So, there is that issue, huge. If we don't have Zoom, we can have people in a large place like this, masked or double masked, and not have a spreader in town. That's important, too. I think there are a lot of people that would feel that way.
People in the room would be like, nothing. I don't know what it looks like back over here, but
Try that in the town office, in Beverly.
The downstairs meeting room. So, how many in favor here and how many in favor
Here, here.
here, raise your hand. There. Okay. The motion is to continue the hearing from 18 here in the town hall at 6:30 p.m. And that's to discuss the AD, to discuss the AD